We are now on Oak Hill, and Oak Hill is the far right flank of the Union Army on the morning of July 1st. And if you look out, you can see once again the Union Army is holding the high ground. The Blue Ridge Mountains are out there in the distance. The Chambersburg Pike, where we just came off of, is out here. And so this is the right flank of the Union Army holding the high ground on Oak Hill. And so they're firing down at the Confederates. They're coming across these fields in front of us. This is the Fournay farm that we're looking at out here, which had corn on it at the time. Now they're growing soy for nutrients, but it was corn at the time. So what General Lee does is, as the Confederates are coming this way, he wants to flank the Union Army here. So he sends General John Rhodes behind the tree line behind us. They found the road that no longer was being used, the old Harrisburg Pike, and they come in behind the Union line that's facing that way. And so the Union line up here on Oak Hill finally gets flanked by General John Rhodes. And if you can see out, you can see the advantage of putting cannons up here, artillery up here, and then firing out along the Union line. Very, very advantageous to do that. So Rhodes comes in behind the Union Army here, and when the Union Army, under the command of Alexander Schimmelpfennig, realizes that he's getting flanked, his men run, and so does he. Schimmelpfennig is a general that he just runs with his men, drops everything, and they run straight back through the little town of Gettysburg. Schimmelpfennig is shot at, and he jumps into a pigsty, and he stays inside that pigsty for all 3 days of the battle. And the farmer will come out and give him some corn and feed the pigs. And so Schimmelpfennig stays in the pigsty for all 3 days. Needless to say, he's put on the desk for the rest of the war. But the men up here and then down farther, they desert, they drop everything, they run back through the town. And this is where General Hancock comes into importance, because it is Hancock who stops the Union retreat. And where does he stop it? Up on Cemetery Hill. And where is the Union line reformed? On Cemetery Hill. So again, Buford sets the precedent by coming out on the high ground, having the high ground, and then Hancock takes over when he stops this massive retreat from the Union soldiers running for their lives as they're being flanked up here. Hancock stops them and reforms the lines up on Cemetery Hill. And I'm not sure if we can see it because it's almost covered over at this point, but way out in the distance there is a tree, and a little bit to the left there's a aqua water tower. That is Cemetery Hill. You see it over here? It's in between that steeple, and you go over a little bit all the way back. You can barely see the water tower. That is Cemetery Hill. So we can imagine how petrified these Union soldiers when the Confederates come in behind them. And they drop their haversacks, they drop their muskets, they drop their rifles, they drop everything, and they run. And they run for their lives back through the town. And again, no one knows how Hancock was able to stop them, but he stops this massive retreat, these men just running in pell-mell, and reforms the lines. They say that Hancock was the most handsome man in both armies. And even the Southern women just loved John Hancock because he was so good looking. And he was also a very, very good fighting general. The Confederate generals called Winfield Scott Hancock the Thunderbolt of the Union Army, because he was such a good combat officer and good with his men out on these fields. So John Rhodes, who was Confederate, flanks the Union line, the right flank of the Union here, comes in up these hills behind us, and then the Union line retreats, running pell-mell back towards town. First day, Union loses 8,000 men. And they literally now have left Her Ridge, McPherson's Ridge, Seminary Ridge, and they've been pushed back almost a mile to Cemetery Hill, where they reformed the famous Fishhook for the second day and the third day. We can't see it, but behind us out here is what we call Barlow's Knoll, and there was a little salient out there by the Union Army under General Barlow. He is wounded twice there. General Gordon, who was at Antietam and wounded 5 times at Antietam, he sees that Gordon has gone down and he's wounded twice, and he believes Gordon is going to die, so he sends him back behind his lines. And Barlow asks General Gordon, can you send some letters home to my wife because I am dying? Gordon does that. Well, Barlow survives the war. Barlow thought that Gordon died during the war, and Gordon thought Barlow died. Well, several years later, they happened to meet by chance at a Democratic convention, and they both think that they're the sons of who they really are, and they realize that they both survived the war. And Gordon was wounded 5 times at Antietam. Barlow was wounded 3 times here. And so it's interesting that years after the war, they become very, very good friends. And they, after years of thinking, they had both died in the war. So John Rhodes is up here. Now he's going to open up his guns on the Union line, and their Confederates are going to come across the Fournay Farm here. And at that time, it was corn coming up here, and they're going to come up on the secondary Union line, and it's General Iverson that has his men out here, the Confederate General Iverson, and his men get chewed up really, really bad as they cross those fields.